Before I turn it over to Dr. East, real quick, a couple of things. Since we're going to talk about PT, you're going to be hungry. And I would encourage you, if you want lunch delivered to you tomorrow, on your way out, stop and fill out a form tonight, because everything tomorrow is across the street except for lunch, and you're not going to have the time to run back over here and get it in the drop box. So if you want lunch made for you to pick up in the hallway, please fill out that form tonight, okay? The Acft demonstration tomorrow for battalion seminars 1 through 6 is at Gruber Field, which is right in that general direction, right next to Gruber Gym at 05:30 in PT uniform. If you don't have a PT uniform for some reason, come anyway, but please be in PTs for as many as you have. And I've got a pair of medium regular pants, brand new, if anybody needs to buy them from me. They started vanity sizing, so I'm wearing smalls. It's awesome. And then same thing for seminars 7 through 9 for battalion and brigade 05:30 at Gruber Field on Thursday. And then everybody tomorrow you're tracking classified briefing in the morning, so no phones, no bags. That's all going to be out front. You're going to sign in. We're going to check your security clearance against a roster, and we'll get you in 08 Marshall Auditorium at the Lewis and Clark Center. That's all the admin I've got for today. And so now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. East.
Whoop. Thanks, sir. Before I forget, we have some of these high-speed posters here. They'll go on sale at halftime in the lobby. You can take these. It doesn't get any funnier than that, guys. So bottom line is these are some of the ones we did for the AUSA last week, and I've got about, I don't know, 30 or 40. You're welcome to take one with you when you go. So my name's Dr. East. Spent 16 years at West Point teaching in DPE, the Department of the Heart. So, and then transitioned down to Fort Eustis in about kind of OpCon down there in 2013 to be the principal investigator for the Baseline Soldier Physical Readiness Requirement Study, which we've been working on since 2013 and culminated a few months ago with a decision brief to the CSA with the decision to move forward with the Army Combat Fitness Test, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. I'm assuming you've heard of that. The bottom line is I'd like to start talking a little bit about holistic health and fitness, and which in my mind is the 95th percentile in terms of where we need to go in terms of a generational shift in how we care, train, and develop soldiers. And then we'll transition over and leave some time to ask questions, which I'm sure that you have. So to kind of move along, if you look at this slide, it gives a little bit of background in terms of the strategic environment relative to what has changed in the last few years to include the NDAA and the change in the direct ground combat definition and assignment rule. And basically, it brought about two major studies, the physical demand study, which was conducted primarily by USARIUM, although we were on that team with them, which generated the occupational physical assessment test, which every soldier has to take in order to assess into the Army today, and then the baseline study, which resulted in the Army Combat Fitness Test. The outshoot of this, however, was this holistic health and fitness concept, which started in 2015 with Exhorto 2115 and has matured to the point which we'll talk a little bit about today. And I wish we had more time to talk about it because it's truly what's most important in terms of solving some of the issues that we have. So bottom line is these are a few of the issues that we've had. Sorry, I don't know what that's about. But the bottom line is first term attrition, if you're not tracking from first handshake through about the end of the first term contract, we have about a 30+% attrition rate in young soldiers. Not sustainable. We can't sustain the force at that attrition rate. Profiles are up significantly. Estimates in terms of lost revenues due to musculoskeletal injuries ranges anywhere, depending on who you ask, from $2-3 billion up to maybe $5 to $10 billion a year. So profiles, accidents are a problem. Musculoskeletal injuries and behavioral health are significant problems. So P2 profiles, P3 profiles, MRC3 rates, all of those are issues that we're facing in terms of the force today. So basically, as we began to work through this XORD on holistic health and fitness, we knew that there were a lot of disparate programs out in the Army. There was R2, Comprehensive Soldier Fitness, P3, Master Fitness Trainer, a lot of different programs. And after a good deal of work and discussion with a variety of people from across the Army, we came up with 5 pillars in terms of holistic health and fitness. And it starts with governance, programming, facilities and equipment, personnel, and leader education. And what I would argue is that this is a system. It's like buying a car. It doesn't do me any good to go buy a car that doesn't have tires on it. It doesn't do me any good to have a system that doesn't have facilities and equipment or programming or leader education. And we are in the process of initiating a program that's going to address all of these, and we'll talk a little bit about a few of these today. So governance, you're going to see a new 7-22. It's a totally different manual that you've seen. If you want to go back to 1965 or a little bit before that, it's going to be a bit of an homage to the FM 21-20s of years ago. It's going to have chapters in it on nutrition, on sleep, on recovery, on moral injuries, on strength and conditioning, on aerobic and anaerobic conditioning. It's going to be a comprehensive manual that was written by individuals from across the Army. So we got a bunch of really smart people together, and this is going to be coming out in a staffing document, hopefully in the next 30 to 60 days. So in terms of governance, that's going to be our governing document, along with a rewrite of 350-1 and a myriad of other policies that are required. So programming will come out of perhaps 7-22, but what we'll also see is a coalescence, if you will, of a lot of the disparate programs that are out there in the Army into a system that we can deliver at the unit level. Facilities and equipment, we won't talk a lot about that today. We've finally developed a template based on the design from the Army Corps of Engineers for a soldier physical readiness facility, which we're targeting at brigade-size elements, which is about a 43,000 square foot strength and conditioning facility. Our goal is to have one of those in every brigade in the Army. Is that an audacious or an aggressive? Yeah, it is. But we believe we can cut musculoskeletal injuries by 25 to 30% rather quickly with those types of facilities. So the cost recovery on these facilities is significant. So I had an opportunity to visit the Australian Army last year, went to Kapuka to their basic training site. They instituted facilities and training that were similar to this, and in the first 6 months cut their injury rate at basic training by 45%. In the first 6 months. So we believe there's a lot of evidence through the Ranger program, through Thor 3, through other militaries that we can cut into this attrition problem and injury problem with proper personnel and facilities. These facilities are a one-stop shop. My physical therapist is there, my occupational therapist is there, athletic trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, OTs, along with some rehab space so that profile soldiers don't have to fall out of the formation and go somewhere else to rehab or recondition. Just a little bit of, if you've been at Bliss lately, you'll know that we stole that picture from Bliss. But kind of an idea behind a facility. It doesn't mean we're not going to have testing sites. It doesn't mean we're not going to have outdoor PT fields. I mean, we're still only going to be in this facility maybe 10 days a month. So we're still, working outside and doing PT as we've known it for the last 20 to 30 years. This is kind of a real quick overview. We basically have a portico out here where a company of soldiers could fall in on. We can train at maximum capacity, almost 500 soldiers at one time. In these zones, basically there's a resistance zone, move over to an accessory training zone, over to a work capacity zone, and companies would fall in here and move through here on a regular basis. Won't get into the scheduling issue. It is going to require some change in philosophy relative to how we schedule. You know, at 1300, Alpha Company may not be in the motor pool, they may be in the Spark, you know, and that's a phase shift in terms of culture that we'll have to think about. So leader education is critically important. We're starting that right now. We're redesigning from the ground up the education soldiers will get relative to holistic health and fitness. It'll start the day they raise their hand and go into the Future Soldier program, follow them through IET to the basic leader course, advanced leader course, senior leader course, all the way through the process, and the same for officers. So we're working on this process. It is imperative for us to train and utilize, to leverage the influencers in the Army. So both my sons were NCOs in the Army. We paid Brian's credit card bills for a couple of years because he was never here. He was always deployed. And my wife screamed one day, and I thought, you know, something bad had happened. So it was a bill for $300 from Fast Freddy's Tattoo Parlor down on Victory Drive down at Fort Benning. And, you know, everybody in his squad went out that day and got a 12-foot steer tattooed on their back. So, and when I talked to him about that, it was, well, my team leader went and my squad leader went, so, you know, what was I going to do? So the bottom line is we've got to work on our influencers in terms of the young leaders and get them to help us move forward in this process. Okay, so let's talk about Army Combat Fitness Test. So the Army's had the APFT for about 38 years. There have been at least 6 major attempts to change it since 1985. We have been unsuccessful to do that. We believe we have achieved irreversible momentum, we hope, and we will talk about that a little bit today and then show you tomorrow. One of the things, I'll be happy to engage anyone on any topic at any time. I would encourage you for a little bit to wait until tomorrow morning when you do some of these events. One of the things we find is it helps answer a lot of questions for folks, but we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions today. So how this started was the baseline study. We spent almost 3 years on the baseline study. The problem that we had is define for me what the baseline soldier skills are in combat. Well, nobody could do that, so we went back to warrior task and battle drills, and we deconstructed the 113 warrior task and battle drills, common soldier tasks at that time, into those that were high physical demand, commonly occurring, and critical. And we came up with 11, wherever that number is up there. So we had 11 tasks that we identified. We further deconstructed those, and we found out within those 11 there were really only 5 tasks. And those 5 tasks were movement to contact, building a hasty fighting position, deploying or utilizing progressive levels of force, and extracting and evacuating a casualty and moving over, under, and around and through obstacles in an uneven terrain. So those were the 5 tasks that we did, and we spent a year developing the Warrior Task and Battle Drill Simulation Test. We took this out on the road to probably 4 or 5 different installations and did focus groups all over the Army and said, does this look about right? Is there something we're missing? And pretty universally, folks said, yeah, that looks about right. So what we did was, actually right down the road at Fort Riley, was we went in and accessed about 500 soldiers. We administered this test, and we administered 23 common physical fitness tests. Bench press, deadlift, pull-ups, dips, ankles to the bar, heel hook, heel clap, 300-yard shuttle run, Illinois agility run, all of those tests, and then we regressed those against the warrior task and battle drills, and we came up with a battery of tests that was about 80% predictable for a soldier to be able to execute high physical demand warrior task and battle drills. Now that's important because when we compared it to their last PT test predicted their ability to execute the warrior task and battle drills at about the 40% level. So by going to the events that we selected, we basically double the predictability of a soldier's ability to execute warrior task and battle drills. So let's roll the slide here, and I don't know how many of you have seen this, but it takes a couple of minutes and then we'll come right back.
The Army is introducing a new physical fitness test. The current test, the Army Physical Fitness Test, has been the test of record since it was developed and implemented in 1980. It consists of 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. The new test, the Army Combat Fitness Test, or ACFT, consists of 6 events that are based on tasks a soldier might encounter in training or combat. The ACFT tests all of the major muscle groups and provides an accurate assessment of a soldier's physical readiness for military duties. The events are completed in order and take 50 minutes or less for an individual soldier to complete. The uniform for the ACFT is the Army Physical Fitness uniform. The events are the 3-repetition maximum deadlift, the standing power throw, the hand release push-up, the sprint drag carry, the leg tuck, and the 2-mile run. The 3-repetition maximum deadlift is the first event. The event is a test of lower body muscular strength, coordination, and balance. Soldiers are required to lift the maximum weight possible, 3 times under control, replicating a litter carry or the movement of ammunition and supplies. The standing power throw is the second event. The event is a test of explosive power and coordination in the legs and arms. Soldiers are required to throw a 10-pound ball up and backwards over the head for maximum distance. The event replicates the movement required to assist a buddy over an obstacle or the power required to leap across a ditch. The hand release push-up is the third event. It tests endurance in the muscles of the shoulders, arms, and trunk. The number of successfully completed repetitions is counted over a 2-minute period. The event is similar to hand and arm movements required in combatives or repetitive loading of ammunition and supplies. The sprint drag carry is the fourth event. The event is timed and tests a soldier's movement skill under anaerobic conditions: sprinting, dragging, carrying, turning, and moving sideways. The event replicates moving a casualty to safety, moving supplies, or moving under fire. The leg tuck is the fifth event. It develops upper body, abdominal, and hip strength. From a straight arm hang, soldiers must raise their legs up so their knees or thighs touch their elbows. The number of successfully completed repetitions is counted over a 2-minute period. This event replicates climbing up and over walls, obstacles, or exiting disabled vehicles. The 2-mile run is the sixth event. The event tests aerobic capacity. This event replicates movements to and from contact. At the completion of the 2-mile run, the Army Combat Fitness Test is completed.
So, and we'll talk, and I'm sure you'll have some questions about individual events. And so far we've administered this to just shy of 1,000 soldiers. We have seen a relatively good performance level out of soldiers. There are some specific events that they have trouble with, and you know, part of the purpose of this is to change the culture of how we train, and so this will definitely do that for some folks. It will also help individuals to focus across the entire spectrum of physical fitness as opposed to just muscular endurance and cardiorespiratory endurance. So not to get into too much detail again, but the 3-rep deadlift, the standing power throw, which is one that we had a lot of issues with optically. I had a lot of individuals say that just looks stupid, and you know, you have people out there throwing a ball. It's actually a phenomenal event, so I'd be interested in your feedback tomorrow. Lower body power, upper body power, we don't do anything with coordination. If you've been around young people lately, they don't walk and chew gum all that well sometimes, and so the coordination factor of it's really important. It's also really critical. We have a lot of stumble and fall injuries in the Army, so it's really critical in terms of dynamic balance because you're not allowed to step back across the line, and in terms of flexibility, which you'll see tomorrow when you give this a try. We're refining the push-up. What we really want is the individual totally supported on the ground, or we try not to use the word resting, but they're down totally on the ground and they're pushing up from the ground. So we've increased the force per repetition by about 25%. We've moved the hands in a little bit and standardized where the hands go. And basically what we see is about a 30 to 50% delta in push-up performance over the last APFT. And in the first 500 soldiers we tested, we had 12 soldiers who passed their last APFT and did 0 hand release push-ups. So you can see how we've increased the force in the push-up pretty significantly. Sprint drag carry is a great anaerobic event. Clearly a lot of movement back and forth with the sled and the kettlebells. Leg tuck is a really good event relative to core strength. And then the 2-mile run. Yes, we did broach the subject of a shorter run, and we're given some specific guidance that we would stay with the 2-mile run. So.
To the point you made about the 0 point on the muscle, about the push-up.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand that.
So basically we had soldiers and we had their 705s, so we knew what their last PT test scores were, which they had passed, and they were incapable of pushing their body up from the ground in a straight line from a totally reclined prone position on the ground. They simply didn't have the strength to be able to do that. So.
But they passed their last PT doing push-ups, say 52 push-ups, 42 push-ups.
Correct. I mean, I don't know how old they were or what the sex was, but yeah, that was either 19. If we had a 18-year-old, it was either 19 or 42. So they passed that and were incapable of doing one of these push-ups. So this is a slide that's a little bit confusing, so I'll try to stay with it for just a second. First of all, if you look up at the top, you kind of get where we are in terms of comparison to the APFT. Industry standards about 70%. We were able to reach 80%. And statistical regression wasn't the only thing. The other guidance we gave was try to come up with events that are going to help us reduce injuries. For example, the leg tuck and the deadlift relative to lower body and load carriage injuries that we have. And so when you look at these intervals in here, it's really important to understand that the designation there is a minimum of 2 minutes. So the way that we've administered this test, and we'll show you again tomorrow morning, is that we develop 4-soldier stacks. So we have 4 soldiers in a stack. They move through the deadlift into a lane, and they stay in that 4-soldier stack throughout the rest. With 16 lanes, we test 64 soldiers in a little bit over an hour, depending on where the 2-mile run course is, and if I have some extra graders on the 2-mile run course, which means give or take, I can do a company in more or less a little over 2 hours. Now, that doesn't necessarily include the 10-minute prep drill or getting ready for the test, but it's not radically different than what we're doing now, perhaps, relative to the APFT in terms of time. These are specific time intervals that would come into play if I were doing a 90-day retest or if I were doing 1 soldier or 2 soldiers at a time. And so what you'll see tomorrow is a 4-soldier stack going through the test events, which becomes pretty efficient and pretty effective in terms of mass testing. We're still not. There's one other bit of refinement. I'll show you some standards in a minute that were IOC standards. I was asked to provide some initial standards. Those standards are pretty much guaranteed that they're going to change over the next year. They are both criterion referenced and norm referenced to a certain degree in terms of the standards for the events. But right now, we are working on an OPAT type model, if you're familiar with the OPAT. If I'm a 42 Alpha, I have to score gold to come in the Army. If I'm a 68 Whiskey, I have to score significant or gray. And if I'm an 11 Bravo, I have to score black or heavy. We're looking at binning. General Townsend has tasked us to re-bin all the MOSs. So we've gone back to the schoolhouses and they've all started to give their input in terms of where the different MOSs are binned. And the idea then becomes the minimum score for that individual soldier is dependent upon whatever MOS they're in. And in a minute, you'll see that's at the 60, 65, and 70% level. There will be some other additional evaluation metrics that are associated with this that are still in development that hopefully give a rater or senior rater an opportunity to look at that soldier from or officer at a broader level. So I'll just leave it at that for now. If you want to talk about icon standards, we can do that offline. These are some initial IOC standards. There's some significant discussion about where we want soldiers to be. The guidance that we got again from General Townsend was we want to help change the culture so individuals that are scoring 70 across the board or 80 across the board or 90 across the board understand that that's where we want soldiers to be. There are not going to be many folks that are capable of training and scoring at the 100-point level on all of these events. We've already had a soldier in the Washington National Guard do 450, and that's when we stopped him. So clearly we have some folks who can deadlift a lot of weight. Had a lieutenant at Fort Leonard Wood run a 1041 after doing the 5 events. So there are individuals who excel in each of the events, but what our goal is to try to get back to a band of excellence somewhere in that 60 to 80 range where individuals are scoring similarly across the range. And like I said, these are probably going to go up a little bit, and it wouldn't surprise me very much if we didn't see this become an iterative process over the next few years. A few years ago, the Marines tried to change to all pull-ups, and they were going to start out at 3, which crushed several groups of Marines, and they had to back off of that because they moved too far too fast, but we'll try to learn from their mistakes. So what's happening this year? We just started FY19. It is the field test year. We have 63 units, more or less, in the field test, 63 battalions. They've already been resourced with equipment, and they are starting to train based on 7-22 and the ancillary training manual that we've provided for them. They'll do their first, whatever term you want to use, diagnostic test, or the first field test on or about March or April of 2019. I suppose the odds are maybe some of you might be moving out to one or more of those battalions. And they'll do a second test on or about August or September of 2019, at which point in time, based on XOR 219.18, the current plan is everybody is resourced with equipment by 1 October 2019, and force-wide begins to test twice a year in FY20 with a diagnostic test, so that we can start to understand where weaknesses are, start to help individual soldiers train for FY21. So the last is full implementation, no later than 1 October 20, which would lead us to the fact that we will be giving the first test of record for the Army in about 24 to 30 months at the earliest. So during the period of the next 2 years, units will take, right now the guidance is 1 APFT during that time. I know that creates some issues for some individuals relative to promotion boards or school or those types of things. We'll have to work out those eaches, but that was the guidance. So basically here's the study. I literally get a phone call every day. I got a call from Korea yesterday. Hey, we're in the field test. No, you're not. All the people in the field test already know that they're in the field test. So it's been really interesting, and people have been leaning way forward to participate. So those are the studies. So there's a call document out. You can take a look at that. It basically was based on the document that we produced. We've tried to identify some exercises for events, and it's really important. If you don't take away anything else today, take this away. You don't need any of the ACFT equipment to train for the ACFT. Right? We've administered this to almost 1,000 soldiers so far, and none of them had seen any of the equipment. They showed up one day. We said, here's what we're going to do tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, and they showed up at 7 o'clock and took it. And the vast majority of them did fine. So you don't need that equipment to train for it, but you do need to train for it. So what we've tried to do is to provide some alternatives, and we will continue to do that on a regular basis. In terms of coming up with training alternatives, either low-tech types of things or, kettlebells or dumbbells or Olympic bars or those types of things. So that brings me to the end, really, and I appreciate your attention and I appreciate you having me here, and I would be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. Sir?
Sir, you mentioned that the Sparks are going to be at Brigade across the active duty spectrum. What about the National Guard and the Reserves? I believe JFHQ is a centralized location.
So the Guard and Reserve obviously present special problems due to the dispersion, but not totally unique, right? Because the 78th Signal is in our field test study, and they're on Guam, Okinawa, and at Zama. So we have units that are dispersed from their headquarters. Really, the Guard's actually a little bit easier for us. So our objective for the Guard and Reserve is people and resources isn't the exact right word. So instead of having a holistic health and fitness team at a brigade, you would have in the state of South Carolina a holistic health and fitness team in Columbia, say. And they're responsible for reaching out to those Guard members in the state of South Carolina and ensuring that they have a place to train free of charge. That may be the YMCA. They've already committed to that, along with other gyms in the local area. They have a program and they have a way to get additional help when they need help in terms of nutrition and those types of things. Those individuals on that holistic health and fitness team would also be kind of doing the circuit, right? So they may go down to Charleston, they may go over to Greenville, depending on where monthly training sessions are. So it's a dispersed model, it's a little bit different model, but it's not really too much different than what South Carolina, Georgia, West Virginia, Indiana is already doing now for the Guard. So that's one of the ways that we're trying to get after this for those other compos. So good question, thanks. Yes, sir.
I just had a question on alternate events. Say a soldier can't do the run or another event, is there alternate?
So right now what we're working on is keeping the ACFT as kind of a binary choice. You either take it or you don't take it. If you take it, you take all 6 events and you take them in order according to standard, So that's what we're working on right now. Break. On the other side, we're working on some type of a return to duty test for individuals who are on long-term, temporary, or permanent profiles. That's really ultimately a policy decision that the Army has to make. It's I don't mean to cop out on this, but it's really not in any way my decision. But we're working on an assessment that we're tentatively kind of calling return to duty, because what the objective of that assessment is to allow a soldier to take different physical assessments over a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, 12-month period of time that would be iterative in nature. So if I can't lift 50 pounds, maybe I can lift 30 pounds or 20 pounds or whatever that is. Fairly practical in nature, obviously diagnostic, and And so it would be the test that an individual would take if they were unable to take the ACFT. So that's what we're working on, and we have a lot of people working on that right now out of USARIUM and AMED and out of MedCom. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Sir, I got a quick
current
question. I
PRT
see a lot of implementation for getting the Army Combat Fitness Test going. But what about the certification piece? How are you going to plan that in for the certification for those that are grading the actual Army Combat Fitness Test? What tends to happen then is we get this big push down to the units, hey, we got to get these guys certified, and then we're already in the window of doing the PT test for certification pieces.
So a couple of things. So if you didn't hear, the question was about certification of the graders. So initially what we've done is we've done a couple things. We've rewritten the Master Fitness Trainer POI to incorporate the Army Combat Fitness Test. So when individuals actually do the MFTC, the certification process at Yakima Dix, wherever, at Jackson, they'll actually be certified. The second thing we're doing is we've got a MIT team. Where are they, Sergeant Major? Hey, guys, are my guys in here somewhere? Well, anyway, we've got our, they're up in the booth. We locked them up in the booth up there. This team is here certifying graders now, and we will continue that process through approximately February of 19 to certify all the 63 battalions in the field test. At that time, we'll pivot and we will start going installation by installation, training somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 10,000 soldiers a month at each installation over the remaining 9 months. So at the end of the year, I think we estimated we were going to have 50,000 to 60,000 soldiers who are trained to administer the test. Ultimately, this becomes kind of a self-licking ice cream cone. And what happens is basically we get to a point where now you're in charge, right? You're responsible for making sure your graders are certified. Now we will continue to provide that training as needed, and it might be a little more residential in nature. But you as a commander will determine, is the site appropriate, yes or no? Are my my graders certified or not? And then you'll move out on the test. I mean, no one comes, I don't think, today and trains you to do the APFT. So it'll be similar to that, 5 years down the road. But we anticipate a significant, mass effort over the next 24 months. We actually have our teams with us for 24 months, permanently assigned to this one task. Sorry, question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you think the current PRT manual has enough exercises already in place to prepare for this, or do we need to rewrite that?
Well, I would certainly like a little more strength and power stuff. But if you're following, if you've got kettlebells, dumbbells, any kind of other equipment, I walked out on the, triple deuce of the 128th the other day, which is an aviation maintenance AIT unit, and I saw 50 Olympic bars out there with weight plates. I had no idea where they got them, but they were kind of moving out on their own and really doing a very nice job at that point in time. But I believe it's the start, and I hope that we're going to be able to do better than that in the near future. And when you see the new 7-22, it's going to be, it's going to go a little bit further in terms of strength and power. In terms of anaerobic metabolism, sprinting and carrying things and doing that I can do that pretty easily. I can do a lot of off-the-ground stuff through eccentric stuff, especially partner stuff, so I can get people to doing ankles to the bar or leg tucks. So I think we can make a good start of it. I would continue to reiterate the fact that we're really talking 24 months. And I think anybody who is really interested in doing this and wants to continue to improve their fitness, that there's a lot of time to start to get after this. So. Yes, sir.
Sir, my question is, I imagine with the increase in strength and power activities that soldiers are going to be training for, there's going to be an increase in muscle mass. Has this going to have a residual effect with Army Body Comp program? As we all know, the tape test isn't a really good standard, and the height and weight chart goes back to the 70s.
So, one anecdote, so I was talking to a general officer, and he was like, I run a 15-minute 2-mile. I've run it every day of my life. I'm an infantryman. I've been dog crap for 30 years in the Army because I run a 15-minute 2-mile. But I'm going to crush the ACFT because he was like 6'4" and went about 240. So one of the things that we've seen so far on the 2-mile run is about 1.5 minutes delta in 2-mile run times due to the pre-fatigue of the other 5 events. What we believe is going to happen is bigger, stronger folks are going to see a lower delta on the 2-mile run. So one of the things I think that will help us be able to do is go back to senior leaders and say, we got to go back and revisit height weight stuff. We got to do a little bit better job on body composition, because if I want someone who's 5'4" to weigh 140 pounds or whatever that is, 150 pounds, you know, all of a sudden I'm busting height weight, we got a real problem. So obviously lean muscle mass is important to us, but I'm just telling you, I've done this a long time. Body mass is really important, period. And so we're looking at, if you looked at those last scores up there, usually the pushback I get is on the 2-mile run times. You know, it's like people start jumping out the window, 21 minutes, well, first of all, this is IOC, and secondly, go do all the events and then run 2 miles, and you're going to see a couple-minute delta in your 2-mile run time. So it's going to be interesting to see who that affects the most. My hypothesis is, you know, if I'm an 11:30 guy, it's going to affect me more than if I'm a 14:30 guy or gal, whatever. So I think that's exactly, in fact, we've already started a study with West Point already on body composition, body fat, and performance on this. So. Ma'am.
I have a regulation question. For soldiers that can't meet the standard in a black group, will the units have to initiate separation, or can they reclass into an MOS where they can meet the physical standards for the gray or gold group?
So let's assume that I want to come in the Army as a 13 Bravo, right? And so I take the OPAT and I score black and I go to training and I move into a unit as a 13 Bravo and I'm there for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And at the end of that period of time, I repetitively score below the black level. Basically, from what I've been told, and we're getting a little bit out of my lane here, soldiers will have an opportunity to reclass based upon the needs of the Army. That's a little bit problematic depending on where they are in their career, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to start retraining someone at the 12-year mark or the 13, you know, to get them retrained, but maybe not impossible. So the idea is that would be an opportunity for soldiers, yes. Y'all been too easy. Come on, guys. Roger.
We were just talking a little bit ago. Is there any opportunity, has there been any discussion about this test just being a pass or go?
Not a lot of discussion, but there has been some discussion. We originally proposed it as a go, no go kind of deal. The guidance we got back was senior leaders thought it may be more important right now to continue to extrinsically motivate individuals to move higher up the ladder there, and that if you simply, you know, drew a line where the black standard was and you met that, did you really need to continue to train? And so the initial decision was we're going to go with 100-point scores, and we'll see where that takes us. But yeah.
How long was the run that you proposed?
4 miles. It really was. I really did propose a 4-mile run, but it was at like an 11-minute pace or 12-minute pace because I could peg it to a ruck march, and so I can't peg an 11:30 2-mile run to any kind of other movement that soldiers do. It was 1.5 miles, anyway, so you might be familiar with other services that run 1.5 miles, and another service that doesn't run either of those, and so. So we do, yeah, it was an interesting moment. So I would appreciate it if you would think a bit more about the process of testing soldiers, because we are testing a lot of people. Yesterday and today at West Point, they tested, give or take, 1,000 firsties on the ACFT in 6 hours. Now that's DPE, and they tend to walk on water anyway, but the bottom line is this is a big effort, and so you may or may not have seen some slides or guidance about how this is going to happen, but the prevailing thought is the rest interval by having 4 soldiers in a stack is more or less a valid rest interval relative to getting good data on physiological performance. It doesn't do me any, so why am I doing this testing? I'm doing this testing to drive training. If I can't use this to help me drive training, then it's not helping me. So if I fatigue a soldier to the point where they do 1 or 0 leg tucks at the end, when in reality they can do 5, but they're pre-fatigued to the point where they can do any, it's not helping me in terms of their training, because I know when I go train them that they can already do 5. So we believe that a rest interval somewhere between the 6 to 8 minute range is about right. And you can imagine if we're doing 2 minutes of push-ups and I put 4 soldiers there, that's 8 minutes with a couple seconds to transition through. So when you think about large numbers of individuals to get through the testing, and we'll do this for you in the morning, we'll play act, we'll line 4 people up and have them kind of rotate through the process. It goes fairly quickly, and it's, I think, a quality experience, and we get good data that commanders can use to help their soldiers. So that would be something I would encourage you to think more about. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question on integration of systems of record. So when we change from the 3 events over to the new one, will that be in alignment with DTMS or whatever else we need to input?
So you're getting further out of my lane, but IPSA-A and all this other stuff, I think DTMS is supposedly going away again, I guess, or whatever. But we've already worked through the folks here, as a matter of fact, to work the ACFT into DTMS. And we've been promised a crude shell in March or April of 19, so that individuals in the field test can go into DTMS and enter the data, the raw score data. They won't need to do the points. And for everyone who's in a field test unit, or if you're in a unit that you want to lean forward and try this out, we've got an AAR questionnaire that we would like, we're trying to develop lessons learned out of this. And so that'll go out to all those units that are in the field test, and we'll pick that data up to get some normative data on where the force is. And we have, I guess, from my perspective, every possible type of unit you can imagine in those 63. We've got 7 guards, 7 reserve. We've got TDA, TO&E, VMI, West Point. We've got, as much as we could think of. We've got a SF, a Special Forces group. We've got a Rangers regiment in there. So, anything else? I know you all want to get back so you can train for in the morning, so I should have brought a hex bar with me. So I appreciate your time, and thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow or the next day. So thank you.